Howdy y'all, I'm Ice Gold, and I've got a little something to talk about here, and it's about Wallaru and the difficulty that we encounter in it. If you ask me, I think Wallaru is a little on the easy side, and I'm saying that as an Ice main who has played through it twice now. And to be honest with you, there's a lot in Wallaru that could use a buff, mainly the mobs. And again, I am saying that as an Ice main who really just had to suffer through with Frost Giant not having a non-shad that does more than 500 damage. But yeah, so the new spells go pretty damn crazy, with the exception of, Count Crocula. But the rest of the spells, they do just insane damage. I mean, y'all have seen Bunyip's Rage by this point. It just does so much. What that allows for is the ability to one-round pretty much all of the mobs in the world. And 6 out of 7 schools are able to do that. If Test Realm hadn't been reset, I would definitely be able to show you on my Storm, because Ice is the 1 out of the 7 schools that can't one-round, but the rest can, so, gameplay, right? Another part of this world that I think is a little too easy is the fact that the bosses are all just kind of Mickey Mouse. Even the ones with cheats are pretty easy to figure out. Like Lord Very Tall and then Freddy versions 1, 2, and 4 are the only exceptions, since you have to go out of your way to have real counters for their cheats. Like on stream, I would pack stun blocks for Freddy, because he would just stun me for 2 rounds if I didn't. So that was easy enough to counter. With Lord Very Tall, I mean, the whole reason why I'm using this deck is for the extra 10% pips that it has. I was actually able to get quite a few power pips against Lord Very Tall with that. Yeah, he wasn't really that bad to fight. It was a little annoying to not be able to hit as fast, but that just gave me more time to set up, so it was all good. And then Ice in particular struggles a bit with Luigi Di Mario, Wizard101's biggest injustice. He gets rid of your shads and then stuns you when he does, so relying on Frost Giant, it's not that great. But it was still easy, because I would just stun block, and then I would set up, and then I would send a Snowball Barrage, and that was all I would need to do. Yeah, even as an Ice, I had an easy time soloing in this world, when everything about Ice is just not suited for late game. It is what it is. Now, the Dasein Urk mobs could definitely use a buff, since they're supposed to be solo instances that mean a lot to the story. The Rage one, for example, which comes from here, it could cheat cast the Rage aura, for example, and then just... that would be like its cheat, that would be its defining feature. I think that could give those mobs some identity, especially because it really does feel like those fights are supposed to be important parts in the story. It's like Dasein is sort of calling out to us, and to save him, all we need to do is use something that even an Ice can do on turn 1 with a Deathly Daps. So kind of just is what it is there. But I'm thinking triple their health, and then add some fitting cheats. That's kind of about it with Dasein Urk mobs. As for the rest of the mobs, I think the Emu Riders out here have about 4,500 health, which I think is about good, just because, it's a good number of health points. Like, you could, depending on what school you are, you can't exactly just one-round those, so having to use an extra buff beforehand could be a good way to keep things difficult here. The problem is, not that many mobs have health like these guys do, so it's just a little hard to compare. Another thing to note is that stats are kind of insane right now, and whatever world comes after this is really going to have to crank the difficulty, because storms can get close to 300 damage with the cap being raised again, so there is that to deal with. Even as an Ice, I still have a Hyper Elixir on, and I'm not level 170 yet, so I haven't had the chance to make any max level builds, but I could reliably get around 240 to 250 damage with this same amount of Pierce. And if you ask me, I think that's kind of steep, especially for an Ice. If they were to scale the mobs to the stats, then I think it could be a little better, because at the moment, as you will see here, even though I'm an ice, this Count Crocula will kill this Bunyip in one turn. And just like that, one rounding mobs as an ice. I don't think that should be a thing. I think every school should have to two-turn. And, you know, that ties back into the whole, you know, buff Frost Giant thing that I've been on forever, but you know how it go. And the other thing is that shads also feel like they're faster. On stream, I felt like I was getting, like, the shads weren't particularly consistent, but I was still getting them on, like, turn 2 or 3 in some instances. And, like, I don't know about y'all, but that's pretty damn fast. So, yeah, that's going to be another issue for the next world. And I think the reason why we get shads quickly is because the mobs that don't have shadow magic don't have an innate rating like the mobs in Novus, for example, do. We just get them quicker off of that. Now, something else that could make the world just a little bit more difficult is adding the raid/Rochambeau rules to PvE. I know that's not exactly casual content, but I think that the idea of, you know, you see like a Life and Fire combat wombat over there. If I were to want to use traps, like feints or something like that, Life and Fire identity is meant to counter traps, and I think that could work. It could add some extra strategy to boss fights where, you know, you can't just spam a bunch of feints and win. Just having some something like that in, it would make fights just a little bit more tedious, but you could always just change around your deck, and that would solve the issue. So that's just how I feel about it. Let me know what y'all think about adding Rochambeau to PvE in the comments. It may seem a little confusing, but I think it's about time that people learned, because, you know, the Eon of Atavus fight, it was rather rough because people didn't really know how to use their Rochambeau, and people didn't know who to target, so it is what it is. So adding those types of rules to casual content could pay off in the long run, especially if the final boss that we still haven't seen yet, although maybe by the time this video goes up we have, I hope so, at least. But if that fight requires some Rochambeau knowledge, then maybe it would be nice to sort of bring it to life in PvE, and make everybody really look at what schools their opponents are, just to get them ready for it. Now, team, I'll tell you one thing. The mobs, as of late, have been more annoying than hard, and, you know, it's... The mobs here have their school's 80% set shield, and I never got that. I think it's kind of silly to have that, because it's not really... The mobs themselves aren't hard. It's basically just up to RNG as to whether or not you're gonna be sitting there for another round. Yeah, you know, best case, they take the 80 shields out and just give the mobs more innate resistance, as opposed to what it is right now, where it's just, you know, if the mob you're fighting uses an 80 shield, you know, you are just gonna be in that fight for another round. So my biggest arch nemesis from the world of Wallaru has got to be those cadet judges, because those guys, I mean, they would spam the -80 ice shields and tower shields, so it was just such a pain to go through that. And it was like being back at Polaris in the River of Frozen Tears with those fire mobs that would just roll you with just annoying stuff like pre-nerf E-freeze, stuff like smokescreen spam and all that. It's just rough. And it adds just an unnecessary element of annoyance, where we could have a necessary element of just extra resistance to make the mobs just a little bit harder and more on par with, you know, these stats at the end of the game. So I asked in the Test Realm Discord as to what people thought could make the world of Wallaru harder while keeping it necessary. And my favorite response came from Savior, who said increasing mob health to something that isn't one roundable, and then boss health should be scaled according to gear, which means, you know, 208 ice damage of all classes, right? And then increase mob and boss resist so people can't just max out on damage jewels, and that would incentivize having Pierce. It was what I was expecting to happen with the whole jewel audit, because I saw, you know, the 10% damage jewels, and I was like, oh, well, you know, surely that means that the mobs are going to have more resist, and so you're going to want to have Pierce anyway, but it did not end out like that was the case. As Savior wrote, your average PvE enjoyer is just going to min-max and create some goofy 27 Pierce, 285 damage setup as a storm, and then increasing resist to 60 would change their mind on that. And I like that because, you know, just because there's a damage cap doesn't mean hitting it is going to really get you further than it would if you were to run extra Pierce. It's like the Phantasmanian Devils out in Billabong Resort. They have something, I think the Moon versions have like 5.1k health, and while that's crazy, it's sort of on par with what I'm thinking of. 5.1k health and some extra resistance would be plenty to counteract like a almost 300 damage build with very little Pierce. So I think that would make the world of Wallaru better if that were to be implemented. Now I am certain about one thing, and that is that there are still some tough bosses in Wallaru, namely some of the Freddy encounters where he will put a 2-round stun on you and then just drop a Winged Sorrow on you that'll do like 2k damage if you're not prepared. So I think that he's a much tougher boss, and I like that idea, but it is still definitely soloable if you change, you know, your deck around to fit it. Like, I ended stream before I did this last Freddy encounter, but what I would be doing in it is I would set my deck so that it would look like this. I would have a Freeze Ray, a Count Crocula, just for cleanup, and then I would have 2 Feints, a Potent, and then a couple Blades and a Sharpen. And what I would basically just do is I would set up for a Freeze Ray to take them both out as quickly as possible, and I would have some stun blocks. So I could pull these first turn to avoid his stun cheat. So that way I could use rounds, you know, 2, 3, 4, and 5 to set up a Freeze Ray to take out both bosses on the same turn before he uses his, you know, little growth thing and then just one-shots me with the Kurlu. So, to be honest, I have heard that healing is the counter to that, so if this doesn't end up going well on stream whenever they drop the spoiler wall, I'll probably just throw that in and probably just toss in a couple Volks and then just clear them to heal off the growth. So there are some interesting mechanics in the Freddy fights, and I do like that there are some more challenging boss fights, especially after the recent patch. The other Freddy encounters weren't really that dangerous, but now it's like you've got to really be prepared, and I think that's not a bad thing at all. We'll really just have to see how the last few fights shake out. I haven't seen them yet. Best case scenario, they are a little tougher. But, I mean, still, even though Freddy is definitely soloable with a little bit of effort, even for an ice, a team is just going to make him trivial in every instance, and this kind of just goes back to my Rochambeau idea, because basically, if you're in a team, you can have one teammate use Mass Feint, and then you can have your other 2 teammates buff you, and just like that, you have like equivalent to a quad buffed hit on the first turn. Like, imagine a quad buffed Bunyip on the first turn. Like, that's just crazy to me. And it really makes the world trivial. It would make team play a little tougher as well, which I think is desperately needed at this point, since, you know, a team of 4 just makes entire worlds, even the tougher ones like Lemuria and Novus, it just makes those trivial. So, yep, who knows what they'll do with the whole Rochambeau idea, but hey, that's just my take on it. But yeah, I think that is gonna about wrap up. Let me know what y'all thought in the comments. And definitely be sure to comment some of your ideas as to how to make Wallaru sufficiently difficult because it really has a lot of potential. It is the last world in the 4th arc, and I think it should feel that way. So, yeah, just let me know in the comments. Speaking of the comments, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave like 50 of them for the algorithm. And I'll see y'all later.